Hello, and thank you for joining us on Your Health Matters. I'm Ron Porterfield.
And I'm Dr. Magda Porterfield.
We're glad that you're with us today. We're going to be talking about self-control. Do you have it? We're going to find out, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yes, well, interesting, I guess I could say a crazy question I have to ask you first off, and that is, what is self-control?
You know, that's actually not so crazy. We need to understand it as we talk about it. Many definitions are out there.
Yes.
There's a couple that I like. One is that it is the ability to persevere,
Yes.
to concentrate, and this one is key, to delay gratification. So that's one way of describing what self-control is.
Concentrate and to delay gratification.
And to persevere.
And to persevere.
Yes.
All right.
Another way of describing it that I like is exertion of control over the self by the self.
Exertion
of control
over
over the
the
self
by
the self.
thyself. I hope you're picking this up. Take some notes.
Yes.
I think it'll be important. Okay. Now, yes.
I was going to say, in other words, self-control occurs when a person attempts to change the way he or she would behave or think or speak.
Right.
They're doing it themselves, over themselves.
Now, honey, you are a psychologist.
That's true.
Mental health expert. So what was your interest in this topic of self-control?
You know, what got me interested is I read a book, actually, by Dr. Roy Baumeister, where he talks about willpower. And for psychologists, sometimes those terms are synonymous, willpower and self-control. As Christians, I don't know if we look at them the same. Well, some psychologists distinguish it. Anyway, he was talking about self-control. And in it, he said something that really caught my attention. He says most of the problems that plague modern individuals in our society, things like addiction, overeating, crime, prejudice, lack of savings, all of these problems, a lot of them have some degree of self-control failure. And when I started to think about that, I said, you know, that's really true. So this is an area, because some of these issues people come to professionals such as myself to get help with. And if we can help them to realize that some of this is due to lack of self-control, we can help them to be able to overcome some of these. Not that it'll be easy, but at least we have this framework to look at. And so with self-control, you're trying to override competing urges and behaviors and desires with more positive behaviors. Because we all have these urges and these behaviors and desires that are not healthy. And self-controls try to override that so we can engage in more healthy behaviors and have more healthy urges and desires.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. It really makes a lot of sense. So now, you know, you've told me this story several times, and I really appreciate this story. I guess I could call it an illustration, but it really was a study quite some time ago that really illustrates this key point of having self-control. Could you talk about that? Share that with us.
Yeah, either in the 60s or the 70s, Dr. Walter Mischel, a psychologist, decided to study the topic of delayed gratification with children. And what he found, some people refer to this as the marshmallow test. It's very commonly called that. And he placed these children in a room by themselves, and he placed before them a marshmallow on a plate, I'm guessing on a plate. And the experimenter said to the child, you can have this marshmallow now, maybe not in the exact words, but the message was, you can have it now, or you can wait for 15 minutes. I'm going to leave the room and come back, and if you wait for 15 minutes, I'll give you another marshmallow.
So you get one now, or if you wait, you get two.
That's right. The children who waited for the 15 minutes, they followed them for a few years afterwards, and they found some interesting things. These children were better adjusted to life. They were less likely to abuse drugs. They had better relationships. They were better at handling stress. They were better at managing money. They did better in life in general. Now, some people have argued, well, we can't only attribute that to them waiting for two marshmallows. There may be some truth to that. But I think there is something that we can see from the fact that these children who waited did better in life. Giving us some idea that self-control is important. In fact, Dr. Baumeister goes on to point out that psychologists have isolated two main, factors that will contribute to success in life. The first one was intelligence. We often think people who do well in life are intelligent. But guess what? The second one was self-control. And of the two, which do you think was most found to be most important to be successful in life?
Self-control.
Self-control, that's right. I've met many intelligent people who are not doing well in life, and I'm wondering if part of their issue was not having proper discipline, not being able to persevere. You know, to go through school and to gain a degree involves perseverance.
Yes.
And some people lack that even though they're very intelligent. So based on this, Dr. Boymeister actually concludes, and I agree, parents should be working more on teaching their children self-control than just trying to help them to feel good about themselves and to love themselves. In other words, self-esteem. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't help children have to have good, healthy images of themselves,
Right, yes.
but it's more important if you want them to be successful in life to teach them how to control self. In fact, in the book Child Guidance, Ellen White spends a few pages talking about the importance of teaching children self-control.
You know, this is very important. I'm glad that you're bringing this out because I've seen many, well, we know many parents, you know, out of a loving heart will certainly let their children get away with a lot. And what I hear you say is that this may not be so good in the long run.
No, it will not. It will not.
Helping them to develop self-control is more critical for a healthier, more balanced life.
Yes,
is that right?
Yes.
All right, then let's look at some areas where we need to practice this self-control.
Yes, there's lots of areas. I'm just going to point about look into four areas.
Yeah, 4 areas.
The first area is appetite. Usually when we think of self-control, we think of appetite. In fact, appetite was the issue that brought sin into the world.
Yes.
But then Christ came in the wilderness and conquered that, so that gives us hope. But appetite in the area of food is a problem for many people. They don't know how to control what they eat, when they eat, how much they eat, and that's an area that people need to work on. But not only appetite with food, but appetite sexually.
Yes.
Some people have problems with pornography and other type of sexual addictions, and that's an area that many people need help with. So the whole general area of appetite is one area. Another area is our words. Some people speak without thinking. Some people don't know how to control their mouths. We've met people like that. Maybe sometimes we've been that way.
Guilty.
I am guilty too. I like what the wise man Solomon says. He says in Proverbs 29:11, "A fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards." So a wise man is a man or a woman who knows how to control their words. They know how to control their tongue. And that's an important area of self-control that we need to work on.
Yes.
Another one is emotions. The wise man Solomon again tells us something. He says, "He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city." There are many wonderful conquerors. I don't know if they're all wonderful, but there are many conquerors in the world who can conquer cities and, take over countries, but they don't have control over their spirit. And so knowing how to control our emotions, our anger, even our sadness is an area that we need to work on when we think about self-control. Go ahead.
Self-control it is so far-reaching.
It is.
It's not just something that we can gloss over lightly.
It is not.
As you put it in this light, I can think back to times where I've seen homeless people, and it's a sad state, but looking at some of them used to be brilliant CEOs of law firms and these types of things, and who knows what tragic event beheld them. I'm not trying to judge any heart or anything like that, but in some cases it was this problem of lack of control.
With alcohol.
Self-control.
Yeah,
yes.
Alcohol or gambling.
Drugs or something like that, gambling.
Yeah, there's one other area, and that's thoughts. Learning to control our thoughts. Sometimes we just let our thoughts go crazy, and we don't realize that Ellen White tells us we are obligated. We have a duty, as actually the word she uses, to control our thoughts. So in the area of appetite, words, emotions, and thoughts are some main areas that I think we need to exercise self-control.
Very good. You're giving us some really good stuff here. So now you talked about these areas that we need to develop some self-control. So let's talk about now some strategies that can help us to move into the direction of having greater self-control.
Yes. Dr. Baumeister, in that book and in other research, there's some key things that we can mention. There are a lot more than that, but we can't cover them all here. One of them that I like is this one. It says, develop a long-range focus instead of a here and now focus.
All right.
And so we want to connect our long-term goals with what we do on a daily basis. That's really important. If we don't do that, then we're likely to give in to our desires and our urges. Let's say perchance you want to cut down on the amount of sweets you eat. You may have sweets in front of you at work, or your spouse or family member may bring it home. But if you keep in mind, even though that urge is there, my long-term goal is to cut down on how much sweets I'm taking in. I'm not going to give into this desire right now, but I'm going to focus on that long-term goal. And you know, it kind of reminds us of what we as Christians, our long-term goal is to be like Christ and to be in heaven. And so daily we have to hold back those urges and desires that will make it more difficult for us to achieve those goals.
Yes.
So that is one way that we can focus on developing self-control.
Wow, very good. Another
Another way is to develop a self-forgetful attitude. Stop focusing on what my desires are, what my urges are, you know? The experiment with the children, when I watched it, the reenactment
That's
of it,
right.
the children who were able to wait for the 2 marshmallows,
Yes.
they looked around the room, they sang songs, they were trying to forget themselves, to forget their desires. And that's an attitude we need to develop if we want to have true self-control.
Forget ourselves.
Forget
Not
ourselves.
being so self-absorbed.
That's right. Another thing that's been helpful is to make resolutions in front of someone.
Accountability, huh?
Accountability.
Yes.
And even if we don't ask that person to be accountable, just the mere process of saying, you know what, I really want to work on not doing this or doing this more, exercising more. The fact that we have verbalized that to someone else places some kind of commitment in our mind that is for more than just ourselves, but for the other person that we mentioned it to.
Probably also helps with support, right?
Yes, it does.
Having that support factor.
Yeah, right. So we want to make resolutions in front of people. We also want to view willpower as a muscle. When you exercise a muscle, what happens?
It gets stronger.
It gets stronger.
Yes.
So we can exercise willpower in small areas, and as we do it constantly, that willpower will get stronger and stronger and stronger. And again, we're connecting willpower to self-control here. Not always the case, but we're using them synonymously here. And then this one is important to take one day at a time. Sometimes we look at the things we need to control and we can get overwhelmed. But viewer, I want to say to you, take one day at a time. As you're hearing this, don't get overwhelmed. Just see what you could do each and every day, and you will find that you will be more successful in controlling your urges. And finally, this is so interesting when psychologists show that religion and spiritual activities actually can help with self-control. Secular psychology. Research shows it. For example, there's studies that show that children who attend Sunday school regularly, they tend to be less distractible, less impulsive, and control themselves more. Just attending Sunday school, and for us as Seventh-day Adventists, Sabbath school more regularly. So parents, it's so important to take children not only to church. If you have a child and you go to church, it's important to take your child to Sunday or Sabbath school. It's not only good for them spiritually, but as we see from the research, it's good for them psychologically too.
And we want to make sure that they're engaged. Is that right?
That's right. We do want to make sure they're engaged.
Yes.
So those are some tips that I wanted to share. Most of it shown by research that can be so helpful when we think about self-control.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, you know, we as Christians, right, Seventh-day Adventist Christians, in the Bible, we know that speaks a lot about some of these principles that you've brought out. So let's go further into looking at self-control from a spiritual point of view, shall we?
Yes, there are examples in the Bible of people who had good self-control and poor self-control.
Oh, yes.
You know, Eve and Adam didn't, especially Eve, didn't have good self-control. But then we have Moses, who killed the Egyptian, poor self-control. 80 years stayed away from the Egyptian life. And with those 40 years, he did well with self-controlling his anger, and he was a meek man. And then right before he entered the Canaan land, he disobeyed God and hit the rock instead of speaking to it, lack of self-control. But he's in heaven now.
Amen. I'm so glad that God looks at the trend, the overall trend, not the occasional deed or misdeed. misdeed.
That's right. And then we have Esau, who
Yes.
gave away his birthright. Then we have some people that I'm so proud of. Joseph, who was, when he was approached by Potiphar's wife. And
Daniel.
Yes. And the 3 Hebrew boys. And then the ultimate example is Jesus.
Jesus, right.
Who showed a lot of self-control. So those are I wanted to just mention that. And then Paul has a verse in the Bible that I just love. Paul looked at the Corinthian or the Roman races during that time, and he compared the Christian life as a race similar to athletes preparing for a race. And he said in 1 Corinthians 9 that every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in some things? No, all things.
Yes.
Now, they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, he says, but we as Christians an incorruptible. Therefore so run, he says, not as uncertainly, so fight I, he says, not as one that beateth the air, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should not be a castaway, or should be a castaway, lest by any means I should be a castaway. So Paul was telling us a lot of things of self-control in there. Be temperate. Keep your body under subjection. Don't just beat the air crazily, with a goal and focus in mind. And he's saying this is what we need to do as Christians. In this Christian race, we must have self-control. And so the other thing I want to mention is, I've mentioned all these things about what psychologists have said about how we can control self. That's great and wonderful. But to have true self-control, we need the Spirit of God.
We do.
It's hard to have control self in all areas of life. We might be successful with these psychological strategies in certain areas. I'm not putting them down completely. But if we want full self-control, we need God's Spirit. So we must pray daily. We must surrender daily and ask the Lord to help us in these areas where we're weak. And I believe He will do so, because He is just a God that promises to listen to us and to answer our prayers.
Amen. And He wants to give us victory, doesn't He?
Amen. Victory, yes.
Friend, it's nice that science is even pointing out now how that research is showing that things like self-control is of the utmost importance, and it's even more important than things like intelligence. Is that right? But we can look to our Bible that gives us many principles for self-control, where we can deny self, where we can think of the lovely Jesus, put our concentration there, and He will give us the power through His Spirit to be able to have self-control in our lives so that we can glorify Him and have that more abundant life. I hope that is your desire. Well, stay with us. We'll be back in a moment with another natural remedy. Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome back to the Natural Remedy Spot. Today we're going to be talking about the benefits of potato and why you may want to consider using it for more than just, hopefully just frying or eating. Yes, the potato is beneficial for many things. We have a slide here. It can be good for inflammation. It can be good for burns, bruises, boils. Also beneficial for peptic ulcers. In a previous episode, we talked about how that cabbage could be beneficial for peptic ulcers. You could drink 1 or 2 cups a day, 1 or 2 cups of cabbage juice a day if you're having problems with peptic ulcers. Well, if one day you're feeling some gastric disturbances and you don't have cabbage, you can use potato. Just juice potato and drink 1 or 2 cups of potato juice. And that also helps to eliminate some of the disturbances of the peptic ulcers. It's a wonderful thing. But today we're going to be talking about how we can use potato externally. That's right, to make a potato poultice. Have you ever tried that? It's a wonderful blessing. So there's several ways we can do that. One way is we can simply, it depends on how you want to use it. One way is we can slice the potato very thin, as you see me doing here, and just like that. So we make these little potato wheels or potato circles. You know, I have a friend that I was working with many years ago. As a matter of fact, we were in some place, actually we were in Los Angeles, and we were doing a week of seminars. And she had had an accident several years ago where she damaged her eyes. And so after a long day of working, her eyes would begin to get puffy and cloudy. And actually, when we did this seminar, several nights, we would apply some cucumber slices under her eye, and that was of great benefit to her. But this particular night, we were all out of cucumber slices, and she said to me, "Ron, do you have anything else that we can use other than cucumber?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, yes. Why don't you try, there again, what we demonstrated tonight, that is potato." And so what I did was I cut some thin slices like this for her, and she applied these to each eye. And she put one of those masks on that people will use when they are wanting to close out all the dark. She put those over both eyes and wrapped that around her head, the mask. And then the next morning when she woke up, she showed me the potatoes. They had turned dark. Well, that's going to happen anyway with some oxidation. But these seemed to be darker than I had noticed before. Anyway, we did that 3 nights in a row for her, putting this potato over her eyes. And she said that her eyes felt the best that they had felt since before she had this unfortunate accident some years before. And so what we believe that was happening is that this potato was drawing the inflammation out of her eye. So you may want to try this. Another time I was camping with some friends, and they burned their finger. We were making a nice campfire, and from some way my friend burned her finger on the side of the fire ring. And she had tried aloe vera. You know, aloe vera is excellent for burns. And she had tried aloe vera, and the aloe vera worked for a little while, but it would always, the burning sensation would always come back. And so what I did is, for her, I cut some potato like this, and just a little bit, and we wrapped that. Say hi to my wife. My wife is here with me. Hi. Right. And this is a little thicker than I did cut it. And what we did was we wrapped that piece of potato just like that around the burn, and then we wrapped it around with some tape. And she had that on for a few minutes, and she says, you know, this provided the most relief, even more so than the aloe vera. No, please, if you have a burn or something like that, continue to use the aloe vera. But in this particular instance, the potato worked the best of all. And then I have stories for you on this potato poultice. There was a time that I was doing another seminar, natural health seminar in Belize. I used to love going to Belize, and there was a pastor there, and she took me over the house of the father of one of her members. She says, you know, I have a man there who is needing some help, and can you come by and take a look at him? I said, absolutely, certainly. So we went to this. You can see I'm just simply grating this potato in the bowl, right? Okay, as I'm talking. So we went over this man's house, and the man was in the bed. And unfortunately, the man had only one leg. He had very bad diabetes. And so his son was there. He was talking to me about his case. And he says, you know, the leg that was amputated 4 years earlier was actually the good leg. And here we were now at this man's house. I was taken there to look at him. And so now we were looking at the leg that was left. And the leg was very inflamed. And it was ulcerated. We had all these different ulcerations on it, very inflamed. And so I took son into the kitchen, and we got several potatoes. I don't know, maybe we got 6 potatoes, 5 potatoes, and we just found a big bowl, and we did simply what I'm doing right now. Now, I wanted to make sure that I trained his son for what I was doing, because I was only going to be there on the island in the Bahamas for a short time, and I wanted to make sure that his son was seeing what I was doing. And so then I got some paper towels, and I got a whole bunch of paper towels, and I simply put the shredded potato in the paper towel like this. Now, this was his whole leg, but we're not certainly making enough for the whole leg now. All right, and we wrap that over like that. Just imagine we're doing a bigger preparation for the man's leg. And so what we did was we went back to the bed, and his son lifted up his leg, and we layered plastic under his leg. And then what I did was applied this potato to every inch of the man's leg that I could. And then we wrapped it around. You can hold that for me, dear. We wrapped it around with plastic, just like that. The whole length of the leg, I had it wrapped, bottom, sides, top. So as I said, we used a lot of potato. We virtually smothered the man's leg in shredded potato, wrapped it around so that it would stay secure. Had his son, as I said, to make sure he did that for several days. Like I said, I had to leave the island, but as I was able to connect back again with the pastor who had taken me over there, the report that came back was that the man's leg was looking a lot better. It was taking the inflammation out. Some of the ulcers were looking a lot better. And what a blessing from simply using potato, drawing that inflammation and then bringing healing. Now, in a case like that, you certainly don't want to simply rely on potato to do the trick. We can thank God for potatoes and what it can do, take the inflammation away, and that's good. But what we also want to do is to rely on good lifestyle habits. Yes, in this case, it will begin to draw the inflammation, but I don't know what eventually happened to the man long term after that. He needed to do some other things that we have talked about here on Your Health Matters. Is that right? He needed to do some things like to eat the right diet, to exercise. Well, this man probably could not exercise at all much because he only had one leg. But even in his case, there was probably some movement that he could have. But friends, in addition to the natural remedies that we're showing you here, we also want to combine these with good lifestyle habits. And that's why we decided that we want to bring this program to you, Your Health Matters, because God has given us simple remedies that we can use. There are times we know that we do need health professionals, and we should work in conjunction with them. But let's thank God that we have health professionals and natural remedies.